Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Scott.
And welcome to God or Not, the podcast where truth springs from argument among friends. This is episode number 2. And coming up, Scott and I will be talking about morality. Also in this episode, spin the wheel. So grab your popcorn, sit back, and enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the center ring. This is the God or Not podcast. We're in for a great night of civil discourse here as these two warriors are revved up and ready to go. And now, let's get ready to dialogue!
Okay, and here we are, episode number 2, Scott. We have survived episode number 1.
We made it one down. There's one in the books.
We're probably a few less listeners now.
So we're down to one. We're down to our last diehard listener.
My mom.
Jamie's mom.
She doesn't ever really listen. It's just in the background. But I tell her, listen,
right, yeah.
click subscribe, and then give us a good review. And she does, and she has no idea what no, I'm kidding. Mom, I love you. Thank you for listening. So today we're going to talk a little bit about this thing called objective moral values and duties. And it is something that both Scott and I agree exist. And, basically it's this idea that there are things out there that are really right. And there are things out there that are really wrong, regardless of what anybody thinks of it. And so we're talking about that. And of course, we see this come up quite frequently, don't we, Scott? In threads.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a quagmire depending on who you're talking to. It can get kind of deep, kind of fast.
It can get very philosophical too. This is one of those topics that there's a lot of verbiage and there's a lot of also to a lot of history. I mean, people have been talking about morality, morals, right and wrong, since humans have been around. And,
right.
So I think that we all have, at least I know you and I have this sense that there are these objective moral values out there. And so today, what we're talking about is primarily how do we ground these morals and duties? Basically, what gives us the authority to make certain things obligatory? Like, why should anyone have to listen to me when I say we ought not kill? We ought not murder, or you ought not rape. And so we'll talk about it from the the atheistic perspective as a naturalist. Exactly how is it that you're able to ground these moral values and duties. And I'm sure we'll have some pushback. It'll be a good time.
Well, that's kind of the point now, isn't it?
Well,
this would kind of be a boring show if we just yep, we agree on that. What's next?
Next. Yeah, you're right. It would. I know that there are some people probably going to tune in just to see some fireworks, and you'll get it. That's for sure.
Well, we better deliver.
That's right. All right. Without further ado, let's deliver.
This is the main event. Round 1.
We wanted to talk about what we call objective moral values and duties. And, just as our sense perception tells us about the physical world, that the physical world is real. Like, we could see things, we could hear things, and we're safe to assume that those things are real. We also have moral experience that tell us that moral values and duties are objectively real as well. And so one of the things that Scott and I both have in common is that we both agree that there are these things that are called objective moral values, and that we can know them. And so we're not necessarily going to be arguing that there is or there isn't objective moral values, but what is the best source if atheism is true, is it able to account for objective moral values and duties? And if theism is true, can it do the same? And so in this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about morals, good and bad, right and wrong.
Sounds good. Or bad, I guess.
Well, good. Yeah, it sounds good. I'm happy with that.
All right.
All right, Scott. So why don't you, why don't we start by defining a few things? How does that sound?
Sure.
So stop me anywhere in here if anything doesn't sound right, or if you have maybe a better definition, or if maybe you disagree. So when we say objective, we mean that it's independent of someone else's opinion. So when we talk about objective moral values and duties, a good example would be something like the Nazis. If they had succeeded in winning World War II and either killed everyone off that disagreed with them or brainwashed everybody into agreeing with them that slaughtering of the Jews was fine, we believe that it would still be objectively wrong. So it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about that particular issue or that particular thing. We believe that it is outside of someone else's opinion. And that, of course, is opposite of subjective, which if something is subjective, then that means it is dependent upon someone's opinion. For instance, I like strawberry ice cream. That is, I think, the best ice cream. That would be a subjective statement. Scott, what would you say your favorite ice cream is?
Boy, any kind of ice cream. Strawberry does rank up there though. But I think if I had to choose a favorite, I'd have to go chocolate.
Classic chocolate. You can never go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So
right.
Objective is that thing that is right or wrong, good or bad. The world is objectively round. So even when people thought the world was flat,
I like it. You use past tense there, right?
I'm not a
There's
flat
still
earther.
people out there now. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do know that. Please, I don't want to be associated with that camp. So, but even when people thought that the Earth was flat, it was still objectively round. And
right.
Then, of course, subjective, we just said, is the opposite of that. It is based on people's opinions. Now, when we talk about values and duties.
Well, before you get off of objective subject, I just want to throw in one. The way that I remember that is just if something is objective, if it's a property of the object,
right?
And something is subjective, it's a property of the subject, of the person doing the talking or doing the thinking. And so if you're like, let's say I'm talking about an apple. Okay, if I say the apple is red, redness is a property of the apple itself. If I say the apple is delicious, that's something that I'm contributing. That's something about me.
Right. That's a good way.
It's not about the object itself. It's about the subject being me of the sentence.
Right. So that's a good way of thinking about it. Now, moving on to values and duties, it's important that we distinguish between these two things because they're not the same. So when we talk about objective moral values, the values deal with good and bad. So we're talking about moral worth. An example would be, it would be good for me to be a fireman. However, I'm not morally obligated to be a fireman, but it would be good for me to be a fireman. It would also be good if I were a teacher or if I were a doctor. And so there can be things that are good, but we're not obligated to do them. So those are values dealing with good and bad. The duties deal with things that are right and wrong. Now, these are obligatory, so they come with certain obligations. It's basically what I ought and what I ought not do. And here's an example of that. So I ought not torture people for fun, right? That's probably something I ought not do. So that would be considered like a duty. So we have the values and the duties, and while good and right and bad and wrong might sound similar. They're kind of in two different camps, and so we kind of have to distinguish between those two. Before we get into the weeds here.
Okay.
Any business or issues with those?
Those seems pretty good, pretty good foundational definitions there. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts in a little bit here, but I think that's a good starting place.
Right. So
I would say duties have to do with more like an individual deciding, what to do with their day kind of thing. Duties have to do with a person's intention or a person's action, and values are kind of like a descriptor, kind of a description of something. Something is good, something is bad, and so on.
Okay. I think what we'll do now is I'll give a quick summary of my position on objective moral values and duties, and then maybe give a quick summary of your position, and then you can kind of clarify some things if you think we need to. So basically, the argument from a theist perspective is premise one: if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. Premise two: but objective moral values and duties do exist. The conclusion is therefore God exists. Now, I want to, just before we even get going, clear up a few misconceptions, because a lot of people, and I know that you are far more advanced into the conversation that you don't make this mistake, but a lot of people do. What the theist is saying is not that atheists cannot know what is good or right or wrong, and we are not saying that atheists cannot be good or that they cannot do right, because oftentimes we know atheists that live a more wholesome, righteous life than a lot of Christians, unfortunately. And so we are not saying that whatsoever. We're not saying that you have to believe in God in order to have objective moral values and duties. We're saying that there has to be a God, there has to be a standard in order for there to be these objective moral values and duties. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, so you're kind of, you're building this on top of the idea of objective morals and values, right? You're kind of saying that, so we agree on objective morals and values, and you're kind of saying, okay, so there must be a God, basically.
Yeah,
in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's my argument. Yes, since we perceive there to be these objective moral values and duties, there must be a God. Now, I have to make that argument. Of course, I have to bring in evidence and things like that, and I have to also tie those loose ends and explain why I believe that to be a sound argument. But of course, that's further down in the podcast. So your position, I'm assuming that it's safe to say, as an atheist, as a naturalist, you're also a humanist. Would that be a correct?
Definitely.
Okay.
That would definitely be correct. Yes.
And so for you, objective moral values and duties are real, and you believe that actions have like objective consequences, beneficial, detrimental, and everything in between. And an action is, quote, moral if it promotes the well-being of conscious creatures, and it's immoral if it harms the well-being of conscious creatures. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds good. I should throw in here that much of what I say about this position, I get from Sam Harris. He wrote a book called The Moral Landscape, and so even though I've incorporated a lot of what he said, I don't always agree with Sam Harris, but I agree with him largely, almost across the board, with his positions in The Moral Landscape. So I just wanted to get that out there. Much of this is borrowed from what Sam Harris has said. I would say one little thing about the statement: objective moral values and duties are real. If I were to say that I agree that they're real, but it's not like they're real like the way that a car is real. It's more like they're real as meaning that we can describe an action as being moral or immoral.
Right. There are
That's
things. There are things that we can actually hold someone accountable
right.
based on what we know morally. So while they're not real in the sense of, the bottled water sitting in front of me or the microphone that I'm talking into, they're just as real in a different sense.
Right. They're real as meaning that they're a characteristic of the physical world. That's the way that I would say it.
Gotcha. Okay, that's fair enough. Also, too, I would add, or else I would probably have to continue saying this. The same thing goes for my arguments. Nothing that I am saying is original. Almost nothing I say is original anyhow. But in regards to this particular argument, all of these things have been borrowed from, several millennia of thought from, a lot of the great thinkers, both Christian and non-Christian, starting back with Plato and Aristotle and moving forward. So it's not like my argument is original either. This is all borrowed ideas and things like that. So I want to make sure I got that copyright out there.
Duly noted. It's been entered into the minutes.
Very good. Okay, so let me start by asking you then. So you think that objective moral values and duties are real? That's a good thing. I'm glad we agree with that. Mm-hmm. Now, you're familiar with what they call the ought-is problem, correct?
Right. Yep.
So for our listeners, the ought-is problem is that we can describe what something is with science and things like that, but science can't necessarily tell us why we ought to do something. So science could tell us a lot about maybe, say, objective moral values and duties. It could tell you from a psychological standpoint, maybe physiologically, what people are going through when they make these kind of decisions. It could tell us maybe from an evolutionary standpoint, if you're in that camp, how we have developed these over time as almost kind of a herd morality mentality. So science could tell us what something is, but it unable to tell us why we ought to do something. So under kind of this idea that there are objective moral values and duties, how would you say you bridge that gap, or can you?
Well, I guess I would say that really I think the crux of that is ought problem has to do with the idea that in order for there to be an ought, there really has to be a goal in mind. Sometimes that goal is explicitly stated, sometimes that goal is implied. And like, let's say, for example, that I'm sitting down at a table with you, and each of us are holding a hand of 5 playing cards. Okay, so just dealt from a regular deck. I have 5 cards, you have 5 cards. And so the question I ask myself is, okay, what ought I do at this point? And part of that is, well, it really depends what game we're playing, right? If we're playing Go Fish, maybe I should ask you if you have any 3s, or so I ought to do that as part of my strategy for the implied goal of trying to win the game. Or if we're playing poker, maybe 5-card draw, then what I ought to do is keep these 3 3s and dump the jack and the 7 in hopes of getting another 3. Okay, and so in that case, it would be there would be an implied goal of me wanting to win the poker game. So I think when we talk about ought, we really have to keep in mind that ought is kind of meaningless if we don't have a goal in mind. Like I said, either explicitly a goal or implicitly. And so if I'm walking around during my normal day, I might be thinking, okay, what ought I do right now in this case? If I come across a situation, what ought I do? Well, maybe I'll think of, okay, I see a car on fire there. I ought to check to see if there's anybody in there. And I think the implied goal is that that I would want to help them. If there was somebody in danger, I would want to help them, just because that's kind of that would be one of my goals walking around during the day. So that would be basically the focus that I would throw, or the spotlight that I would throw on that is ought problem, is that if we try to use the word ought without a goal, then it kind of loses its meaning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think then I would ask, so you believe that if it harms the well-being of conscious creatures, that we ought not do it, and if it's beneficial, we ought do it.
Well, I would say that our ought really so if our goal, if our personal, so ought, are we talking about it like big O ought, like a societal level ought?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, the implied context of that would be the well-being of the society. Okay. So if we say I ought not steal from somebody, I might want to make the argument, well, if I stole from them, then I would have more, right? Wouldn't that be better for me? But if we consider that in the we are, as a matter of fact, I think we would agree that it's an objective fact that we're societal creatures, right? That we live with others in communities and civilizations and so on. And so the smooth running of the society and the smooth running of the civilization is important to us. And so that's where I would say that these ought, or these moral duties, would derive from the fact that we do in fact live with other people. And if I stole from somebody, then that would upset, and it would give me a short-term gain of having, an extra $5 or whatever, but it would give me the long-term drawback of having it, having that balance, that societal balance, upset. And so I think that would be, if we're talking the big O ought, there would still be that context of the world that we live in, and so that's
right.
how we would apply that.
So why, though, assume, and we're going to assume for the sake that atheism is true, that there is no God, that
Okay.
naturalism is the correct worldview, and that we're just molecules in motion. Okay, that we are just, Carl Sagan said this in the 70s and 80s, and then people like Richard Dawkins and other people have basically picked up this idea since, that we are nothing special. We are just a species of creatures on a tiny little planet in the midst of a sea of nothingness. And they've been saying for decades that we are nothing special. And so in the animal kingdom, we see animals stealing from other animals all the time. So why, but we don't necessarily think that that's the case. For instance, a chimpanzee grabs a banana from another chimpanzee. It doesn't steal the banana, it just took it. Or when a whale forcibly copulates with another whale, it doesn't rape the other whale, it forcibly copulates. Or when a zebra is killed by a lion, it's killed by the lion, it's not murdered. And so under atheism or naturalism, if that's true, we're just an advanced primate. Why believe we are any different than the animal kingdom? We are just but an advanced animal. So why think it best to do what's best for society? Who cares what's best for society? That would only tell us that it might be beneficial in some way, but that's not telling us why we ought to act differently than, say, animals do.
Well, here we can separate the objective measurement of an action, right? We can determine whether or not an action either benefits or harms another person, right? We can, if I steal somebody, it's easy to point to the harm that was done there. And so And so that would be the objective application of the value. Now, you asked why should we care, right? If we're just like anything else in the universe, why do we matter at all? Well,
why are we special? Why are we special?
Right. And what I would say to that is, well, we are special to ourselves.
But that's just speciesism. That's just a bias towards one own species. Why not cockroaches?
Right.
Why not chimpanzees?
The reason is because we are not just part of a human community, but we're part of this worldwide ecology.
But why under atheism does that matter? Why does it matter how well we treat other people? I mean, and who's to say that?
Because I'm a person.
But what
and so
difference does that make?
It matters to me how people treat other people.
Well, who would be right then, Hitler or Mother Teresa? If it came down to choices between two people, right? Mm-hmm. Do we treat people the way Mother Teresa says we should treat people, or the way Hitler decided he wanted to treat people? Because Hitler, in a lot of ways, believed he was right.
Mm-hmm.
So why not?
Why not? The question would be then, who can demonstrate the harm and the benefit? And so, by the way, I don't think
why does harm and benefit have anything to do with what we ought to do? I think that you're like making the well-being of conscious creatures. You're making that the ultimate good. So the ultimate good is. I
didn't say the ultimate good. I would just say that that's something that's good.
Right, but what I'm saying is why is that your stopping point? Like, why is it? Well, we are special, and we got to look out for number one. So we could somehow impose rules and values upon people, even if they don't agree with it, for the sake of society, I suppose.
We could demonstrate that societies that operate that way are harmful. We could show that. We could show that if a group of individuals enslaves another group of individuals, we can demonstrate the harm. We can show it. We can point to it.
Right. But that's right. But that's epistemology. So epistemology, we probably should define it. Epistemology is like as a theory of knowledge, and it is the investigation of what distinguishes like a true justified belief from opinion. So it's basically how we know something to be true. So epistemologically, we could know that it's wrong to enslave people because that harms them. There's a lot of things that science can show us. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that science can do in that regards in terms of epistemology. But what we're talking about here is ontology. What something is, the nature of it. So on naturalism, why does that make any difference? Why should our species be top dog? Why should we impose our values and our morals upon other people?
Well, I didn't necessarily say our species should be top dog. I did say that we matter to us, and the other things in our world also matter to us because they're part of our world, right? Mm-hmm. If we like, for example, if we live on a farm and we're cruel to our animals, maybe we whip the horses or something like that. What that's doing is that's promoting harm. So we're living in a society that's actually harmful to other creatures, and so then that opens the possibility that, well, maybe somebody's going to be harmful to us, or maybe my child is going to see that example and going to be harmful to another child, or is going to be harmful to somebody else's animal, or damage somebody's property, or so something. So we can. So the idea here is that we can look at an action and we can decide. We can show, we can demonstrate hardcore. This is harmful. This is beneficial.
Right, now you
asked about ontology, and what I would say is that what makes an action be good, right? Not just necessarily be described as good, but actually be good, has to do with the context that it's in. So, stabbing somebody is in some contexts would would be bad. In most contexts would be bad, but we could think of scenarios where stabbing somebody would be a good thing.
Right. Again, but that's epistemology. That's that's how we can know something to be true. That's epistemology. That's not
right. Well,
ontology.
isn't that what's relevant to us though?
No, what I'm looking for is not, you don't whip your horse because you want to take care of your horse so that your horse can grow, can work on the farm and could be beneficial to you. And you don't want your kids to see that because that's not how you want your kids to act. But I'm asking, under naturalism, why does that matter? That all you're telling me is that for practical reasons, for pragmatic reasons, I ought not do something because it's beneficial to me, but or to society, but that is just pragmatic in nature. That doesn't tell us why we ought to do something. Like I said, why should Hitler be vetoed? Just because it harms people. And again,
that's exactly why. Because of that. That's the entire reason.
So it's in human flourishing is the goal. Is that a fact or no?
That would be part of it, I suppose.
So if we at some point decided that, you know what, euthanasia is probably a good thing for society, that would help. If you reach a certain age, as we get older, our bodies break down. We're aware on. I'm already aware on our health system. As we break down, we're aware on the health system. We're detrimental to our own families sometimes, and so at some point in time, we could see that maybe it would be beneficial for society that we euthanize anyone over 70 years old. That would help flourish the human race. That would help so that we're not overpopulated, and that could help on a number of levels. So you see, it seems very arbitrary to say that human flourishing is that standard, that thing that we should say we ought not do something because it doesn't promote human flourishing, or it does promote human flourishing, so we should. So
let's look at that. Let's look at euthanasia. Okay, so if we could demonstrate that was beneficial for society, then that would be a good thing. I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can do that. I think it's clearly demonstrable that it's not good for society, especially because we have other options available. For example,
you're just telling me though that your standard is what's beneficial for society. And I'm telling you that if at one point we find that is beneficial for society, then you would be on board with it. According to your own standards.
If you could demonstrate that was a good thing, then
wow,
who could argue? You couldn't argue.
I could argue. Well, not if atheism is true.
If it was a good thing.
If Christianity were true, I could say no, that God has created us in His image, the Imago Dei, and that because of that we have intrinsic worth and intrinsic value, and no one has the right to take anyone's life.
But then you would be wrong.
No, I wouldn't, because
you would be demonstrably wrong.
No, what I'm saying is, if Christianity is true, so I was on your worldview. I was saying, okay, if atheism is true, why do we ought not kill off old people because they're a drain on society? And you said, well, because we can't show that it's beneficial. And if we could show that it's beneficial, I suppose, then that's something that we would consider. So what I'm saying that if Christianity is true, then that would be completely wrong, and we could show it to be wrong. But that's
wait, hold on a sec. If Christianity were true and euthanasia could be demonstrated to be good?
No, because we know it's not good. No, I'm not saying Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So we were talking about if euthanasia could be demonstrated to be good.
If euthanasia could be demonstrated to be beneficial for society.
Right.
Beneficial to human flourishing.
Right.
Okay? Then under atheism, there's no reason why we shouldn't consider that.
Well,
I'm saying is under theism, we would never consider that, no matter how good it is for society.
And then you would be wrong.
That's no, because
But
if
you already said
Christianity-
that if we could
No.
demonstrate that it's good, and you said
What
it was not good, then you'd be wrong.
No, Scott, you're misunderstanding me. I'm saying, and maybe I'm jumping back and forth. I'm saying if atheism is true,
Okay.
if atheism is true, then under that standard, if we find that euthanasia to be a good beneficial thing for society, that's something we ought consider. However, if Christianity is true,
Okay.
so now Christianity is true. No matter how much euthanasia would benefit society, it would be wrong because God says it's wrong.
Well, then God would be wrong.
No. Why are you suggesting that somehow good?
If we can demonstrate that it's good,
No, if we can
Then-
demonstrate that it's good for society, not good in the but under atheism.
Well, good
if
for
we
what
could
then?
demonstrate it's for human flourishing.
okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm. So what I'm saying though is, under the Christian worldview, that would not be good. And even if we could show that it was somehow beneficial, it still wouldn't be right. Right? Because some things could be beneficial. It would be beneficial for me to kick in the house next door, the neighbor's door, and go take all their stuff. That would be beneficial for me if I could get away with it. But it doesn't mean it's right.
So that would be beneficial for you in the short term, but it would be harmful
Well, it
to
doesn't-
you. It would be harmful to you to be in a society that kind of thing was okay. Right?
No, I understand that. But what I'm talking about is what is your end goal, right? What is your reason for saying we ought do something and we ought not do something? And what I'm or we ought do something and we ought not do something. I think I said that right. Anyhow,
Yeah, that sounds
and
right.
What I'm I'm tongue tied, and what I'm saying is, and it's hard because maybe I'm jumping back and forth too much, saying. But what I'm saying is if under atheism, if atheism is true, then we should do what would be beneficial for society. Like,
I think we should do that regardless of whether or not atheism is correct.
we'll see. But the thing I'm saying though is that just because it benefits society doesn't make it right.
Well, what else would right mean? So under your paradigm, what does
right.
right mean?
Right comes from God's nature. So the good and the right, the good comes from God's nature, and the right comes from His moral commands.
And so if God told you today that murdering was correct, that murdering was a good thing.
That's the old Euthyphro dilemma. You're not going to kick that old can out, are you?
I didn't say Euthyphro. What I'm saying is if God told you that murdering was good, would that be good?
That's like telling me, can you make a round square?
You're not answering the question.
And I'll tell you why, because it's a false dilemma. You're giving me only two options, either yes or no, but there's a third option.
Okay, what's the third option?
So
imagine this scenario. You're sitting there, God starts talking to you, and He says, Jamie, murdering is good. I want you to go out and murder 6 people today. And so what's your take on that? Let's hear the third option.
Right. So what I'm saying is this is what's called in philosophy as the Euthyphro dilemma. And it comes from the old, from Plato, and he had this question, something
is
good
an action
because
pious?
God is something good because God says it's good, or does God say it's good because it is good?
Right.
And what the theist would say is there is a third option, and that is something is good because it comes from God's nature. God is just good. That's in His nature. So God doesn't look to another standard outside of Him, and He is not arbitrary and just deciding, I think I'll make murder wrong today, or I think I'll make stealing right today. God would never do that because God is good, and these commands flow from His nature. So what you're asking of me is it's almost like saying, could God make a rock so big he can't lift it? Well, I can't answer that question.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I can't answer that question. No, God can't make a rock so big he can't lift it, because God can only do that which is logically possible and that which flows from his nature. And so what I'm saying is God would never make the command that now killing is good.
Okay.
And killing is right, and I ought to do that on a regular basis.
So we're considering a hypothetical situation. Okay. So what would you do then? What would you say if God said that to you?
I think it's ridiculous, Scott, because it's not, God would never say that. So you're asking me to answer a question. It's a dilemma. It's a false dilemma. You're only giving me two options, and what I'm saying is that would never happen.
I just asked an open-ended question. I just said, what would you say to that?
I just told you the answer, that would never happen.
So if God said that to you, you would say to him, you can't do that?
No, you know what I would say? I would say that this must not be God, because in his word, I believe in the Bible, it says, thou shalt not murder.
So
right?
now you're promoting the contradiction here. I just said, let's say that God tells you that murdering is good.
Right, but what I'm telling you, Scott, is you're giving me a question that doesn't have an answer to it. You're giving me a false dilemma. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it's addressing my question.
Yeah, because I'm not giving you the answer you want. I
didn't want any particular answer. I just wanted an answer.
Right. So if I say no, I would tell God to shove it. Then you'd say, see? Where's your grounding now? And if I said no, I would go ahead and do it. And you go, see? Ha-ha. That's like saying, hey, did you stop beating your wife? Well, I think you made right. I think you made that the last time that we said something. That's a question I can't answer, because I don't believe that either one of those are right. I've never started beating my wife, and I haven't stopped because I never started.
So let me rephrase my question then. Okay. What if you don't understand God's nature? And God's nature is such that murdering is bad. What if humanity, don't understand God's nature? Certainly that is something that we can wrap our heads around. Sure. What if we actually don't understand what God's nature is, and God says to you murdering is good? Now, would that make murdering good?
Again, I can't. I would say that that is just even too difficult to even think of. First of all, I would say that God should have probably done a better job of expressing what is right and what is wrong. I
would agree with you on that. Yeah.
Okay. So at that point, but what I'm saying though is, if Christianity's true, or if theism is true, and there is a God. We believe that he has, almost all theists, Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike, believe that God has given us an innate sense of what is right and wrong. Okay. Over the big perspective, and so we have kind of an innate sense of, wow, that would be wrong, or that would be right, and that would be good. So that's what we would say is good, right, and wrong, is from God's nature. But I'm talking about under atheism. If atheism is true, then why do we ought do something? And here's the thing too. Let me just say that I think we're at a point now to where we're starting to circle or spin our wheels. So, okay. What is there something else that you wanted to to go through or to touch on, kind of before I'm thinking about wrapping up. Okay. So I wanted to see if there's anything else that you wanted to hit on, or something you haven't said. I'll let you have the last word.
Well, I mean, we started out, you started out your argument. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. And I presented an option for a grounding for objective moral duties and values that is not dependent on the existence of a God. And
Okay,
and
I promised you the last word. There you go. I wanted so badly to jump back in, but I'm like, no, we will continue to circle. We can't do that. They will not tune in for episode 3.
I think you're still talking. I think you're taking my last word from me. By pointing out how you gave me the last word, you're actually taking the last word.
Okay, Scott, my face is broken to pieces from that back and forth. I may have to go to the ER.
Yeah, it was a epic battle.
Get the X-rays. Good. That was a good fight. I enjoyed it.
But we came out still friends. That's what's important, right?
No, I mean, I want to change your mind. That's what's important.
Oh, right. Oh, shoot.
Friendship
okay,
is secondary,
dang.
Scott.
All right. Well, I got to go sharpen my knives then.
You've always been second in my heart. Oh no, that was
okay.
No, it was good. You know what? For our listening audience, this is one of those topics that's hard to talk about with people, even with strangers for sure, but even with family and friends. Morality.
Sometimes, especially with family and friends,
like what you ought to do. Telling someone what they ought to do. I mean, that could get pretty heated, and sometimes, man, we lose our heads and lose our cool. But I think we reeled it in, and did.
I think so. I think we did just fine.
So
you know what? I just want to interject in here. It reminds me of when I'm in Taekwondo class, right? When I'm facing my opponent, everybody in that class is my friend. Where it's not like I have bitter enemies in there, but we fight each other. Mm-hmm. It's a fighting sport, and basically I fight my friends. I've fought my wife. I've fought my brother. And many of my friends, my kids. Mm-hmm. I've fought my kids in Taekwondo. And so, and obviously, I hold back. It's all about self-control. But basically what we're doing is when I'm facing off with my opponent, I want them to try to kick me in the head because I want to get better.
Right.
That's kind of the point. And then when we're done, we shake hands and we move on to the next thing. And so it's kind of the same thing here.
That's a very good point. Too often when, particularly like, say like a Facebook on threads and things like that, a lot of times we have left the conversation 5 or 6 posts ago, and what we're currently doing is just being dogmatic for the sake of the rest of the people watching in, and we're too afraid to be in that scuffle and let the chips fall where they may, like present your best argument and let the other person present theirs, and then just let the chips fall. And a lot of times we put up that wall where maybe I'm not interested in improving. I just want to win. And that's kind of the bad attitude. Unfortunately, that a lot of times, if we're not cognizant of that, that's the attitude we have on almost a subconscious level. That we want to win the argument, we want to win the discussion, and we want to, everybody to agree with us when we get out of there, as opposed to what you were talking about. Just, hey, you know what? I want them to put out their best for them and for me, because that's going to make us both better. That's a really good point. And I think
that's the motto of our show, right?
Argument amongst friends.
Where truth stems from argument amongst friends. Yeah. And so that's what we're shooting for.
Well, if they enjoyed Morality Part 1, I think they will love the next few episodes. We do have one that kind of stems from this discussion. And so, Scott, if you remember, we in Part 2, Morality quote Part 2, where we really don't talk about morality much. It is kind of behind the scenes. We're kind of setting some things up, trying to figure out how we're going to do some things, and it turned out to be a really good discussion. So, and that'll be sometime down the road. So hope you look forward to that.
Yeah, because part of what we're doing here is not just arguing about stuff; is we're trying to, and we might sound like super smooth professionals on the air, but
right.
But we're just we're hacking our way through this just like anyone else. We're figuring this out as we go here.
Right.
And so so I thought it was interesting. It was really fascinating listening back to that discussion. Just that approach. We've committed to doing that. We've committed to communicating, and so that really molded that whole discussion. So I think that I'm looking forward to hearing that one on. In an future episode.
I would love to get some listener feedback at some point. I would love for.
Well, you just give your mom a call, right?
Oh, that's true. Hey, Ma.
Right.
Hey,
don't you talk to her already?
It's your eldest.
Just ask her.
Yeah, right. Yeah. She would say I don't talk to her enough. So maybe this is an excuse to give her a call. She'll probably be like, which one?
There you go.
Which one? Oh, that one. Yeah, you kicked his butt. You did a good job, James. Like, no, it wasn't kicking anybody's butt. It was some anyhow. So having hacked my way through that, let's move on to our side bit here, spin the wheel.
Spin that wheel.
All right, so we're spinning the wheel here, and in this side segment, basically,
no whammy.
No, right, no
whammy, baby.
So
Woo!
What's going to happen here is that I have selected topics that I'm going to throw at Jamie, and so I'm going to spin the wheel and pick one of them at random, and then he's going to have 2 minutes to answer, and he can answer that in any way that he wants. And once those 2 minutes are up, then boom, then we're done. I'm going to cut you off, Jamie. That's it. You only have 2 minutes.
All right.
And then we're going to go the other way. Then he's going to spin the wheel and ask me a question. So here we go. Spinning the wheel.
Woo! Come on, baby.
Big money, big money.
Land on something I know.
Bankrupt. No. Okay. So that number. Okay. So we got, here's your topic. The topic is, this is a big break from what you're used to. The topic is theology. Okay. So here's the question. What is hell? What is it like? Am I going there? And do I deserve it? So I'll give you a few seconds to think about those. What is hell? What is hell like?
Holy
Am
cow.
I going to hell? If I were to die this instant, am I going to hell? And do I deserve to go to hell? You have 2 minutes starting.
Okay. I'll first say that we all deserve hell. Okay, so I'll include myself in that. Every single one of us deserve hell because we've broken God's moral law. God has given us a moral law. He's written it on our hearts. We break it all the time. And because God is perfectly just, he can't let something like that go unpunished. So he wouldn't be perfectly just if he didn't punish us for the things we've done wrong. And Hitler wouldn't get his due deserts either. So we're all in that position where we all deserve hell, but God didn't want that. He wanted, obviously, his creatures to commune with him. And so he made a way that we wouldn't have to do that so that he would be punished himself. He'd take the punishment on himself so he could still be just and then pour out his mercy and love upon us. And so I would say that we have to accept that we have to accept that reprieve or that that gift from God. So anybody who hasn't accepted that gift from God will be going to hell. And what hell is it's just the worst conceivable place. And it is that way because it is absent of anything good, because God is the good. And so anything apart from him is what we would consider hell. Now, in the Bible, there's all kinds of talk about hell. There's a lot of different things to think about, whether it's fire, torment. I don't know one way or the other. I just know it's the worst place ever.
Boom. Perfectly timed. All right. Well said.
Holy cow. Man, I was on the hot seat there, buddy.
Well, my goal is not to make it easy for you, right?
And speaking of not making it easy for you,
Okay.
I have a bunch here to
All
pick
right, you
from.
ready to
So
spin
go
the
ahead.
wheel?
We'll
All
spin
right.
the wheel. Let's go. All right, and look at that. So the question is this: what argument for theism did you find the most persuasive, and why?
Okay.
And why?
Okay. All right. You ready? You want to start the timer?
Let's start it. Here we go.
All right. Well, first I would have to say what do we mean by quote unquote most persuasive? Because obviously I don't believe there's a God, and so I haven't been persuaded at all. So I guess what I would have to say, I mean, I could answer that a couple of different ways. I could answer, what do I think is the least unpersuasive? Because certainly there are worse arguments than others. Believing a God because my dog told me to is less persuasive than say, pretty much anything else. But the way I would approach it is, what do I think? What do I think convinces most people of God? And what I would say there is just that it's not even necessarily an argument. It's more of just that's just what we do. It's I don't know if I would say it's an emotional response. I don't know if it has to do with upbringing, but I would say that the most effective reason that people believe in God is the mere fact that we are, that we've evolved a certain way, and we believe what our parents tell us. And so if our parents are telling us from a young age that that there's a God, and they're talking about it as if it were a fact, then that's kind of what we adopt, and it becomes part of our psyche. It becomes part of what's ourselves. It becomes part of our identity. Now, that's not to say that always works. I was raised in a religious family, fairly religious, not super religious. They're actually more religious now than they were when I was growing up. And so it was kind of a loose, we kind of moved from church to church. Boy, I'm running out of time. But I would say that, where the way people are brought up is the most reason that people believe in God.
And that about wraps it up for this episode number 2. Please send us your ideas, questions, and comments to email at godornotpodcast.com. If you'd like to know more about the topics covered in this episode, Scott recommends,
well, I already brought it up in the discussion, and that is The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris. It's a very easy read. He's, I don't know, he has to be one of the most eloquent writers I've read. He gives a much more detailed and fleshed out description of what I was trying to stumble through in my talk earlier. So that's The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris.
No, I can't recommend that book because that'd be like apostasy. But I will say that I have read it. It is a good book. It's like it's easy to read given what we're talking about, like the philosophical nature and some of the science behind it. But he does a good job of like kind of, for the layman, so to speak. So
right,
I'm not going to say I agreed with it, but I thought it was a good and interesting read. So
you're not signing off on anything here. We've well established
right.
This is my recommendation.
My recommendation
now, what's yours?
Is the book Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. And he is a Christian philosopher. And basically the book covers, this isn't exactly what we talked about today, but it's in the realm of morality. And I know there's a lot of people who have questions about certain things in the Bible or in Christendom. For instance, the slaughter of the Canaanites. How could a good God, do something like that or command something like that. And so Paul Copan, he takes a lot of these objections and kind of in the book kind of walks through and explains to you, a lot of times it's a contextual thing. But it's a very good book for those who are interested in morals, objective morals. Where do they come from? Is God bound by these kind of morals? If there is a God, that kind of thing. So I think our readers or our listeners will enjoy that as well. So, you got anything else, Scott?
No, that'll about do it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll be back with us next time when Scott and I will be talking about abortion. Until then, this is your dialectic duo reminding you to talk to each other.
Bye-bye.
This has been the God or Not podcast. Send your questions or comments to email at godornotpodcast.com. If you'd like to support the show or grab some God or Not gear, please visit the website at www.godornotpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.